Okay. Acts chapter 12, verses 1 to 18. About that time, King Herod began to harass some who belonged to the church. He had James, John's brother, killed with a sword. When he saw that this pleased the Jews, he arrested Peter as well. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread. He put Peter in prison, handing him over to 4 squads of soldiers, 16 in all, who guarded him. He planned to charge him publicly after the Passover. While Peter was held in prison, the church offered earnest prayer to God for him. The night before Herod was going to bring Peter's case forward, Peter was asleep between 2 soldiers and bound with 2 chains, with soldiers guarding the prison entrance. Suddenly, an angel from the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the prison cell. After nudging Peter on his side to awaken him, the angel raised him up and said, "Quick, get up." The chains fell from his wrists. The angel continued, "Get dressed, put on your sandals." Peter did as he was told. The angel said, "Put on your coat and follow me." Following the angel, Peter left the prison. However, he didn't realize the angel had actually done all this. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself. After leaving the prison, they proceeded the length of one street when abruptly the angel was gone. At that, Peter came to his senses and remarked, "Now I'm certain that the Lord sent his angel and rescued me from Herod and from everything the Jewish people expected." Realizing this, he made his way to Mary's house. Mary was John's mother. He was also known as Mark. Many believers had gathered there and were praying. When Peter knocked at the outer gate, a female servant named Rhoda went to answer. She was so overcome with joy when she recognized Peter's voice that she didn't open the gate. Instead, she ran back in and announced that Peter was standing at the gate. "You've lost your mind," they responded. She stuck by her story with such determination that they began to say, "It must be his guardian angel." Meanwhile, Peter remained outside, knocking at the gate. They finally opened the gate and saw him there, and they were astounded. He gestured with his hand to quiet them down, then recounted how the Lord led him out of prison. He said, "Tell this to James and the brothers and sisters." Then he left for another place. The next morning, the soldiers were flustered about what had happened to Peter. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God for that reading from the book of Acts. I bring you greetings from the God of broken chains. I bring you fire from the God who would rather burn down a city than let the fires of liberation go out on this planet. I bring you the sweet waters of Oshun and the Agungun, or the ancestors in English, like my ancestor Thomas, who wasn't an American when he was captured in Yorubaland, and who was not a US citizen when he escaped from Detroit to Canada, and nor was he treated like a citizen when he came back as a Union soldier to free others like himself at Niagara Falls, where many who escaped the United States system of chattel slavery ended up. A system based of people replaced for property, of possession, of oppression, and possession for wealth, power, and land. I also bring you the undeterred, undaunted, unafraid, unbothered, but certainly heartbroken greetings of a Black trans femme in the 21st century who is also a minister in good standing in the Church of Jesus Christ, as expressed in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. And finally, I bring you the extended blessings of my Bishop, Elliot Summer, and our presiding prelate, Yvette Flunden. I, of course, am incredibly grateful for the invitation to your community by your group of leaders, some of whom I know and are very dear to my heart. Presiding prelate and Holy Convocation this summer said it's a particular thing that I want to present to this community because this seems like a community that's of that flavor. And she said that it's a peculiar time in which God is calling peculiar people with particular gifts to the ministry of radical affirmation. And this space is blessed with those folks who are, I happen to know a couple, are peculiar people with particular gifts for the ministry of radical affirmation for such a time as this. Um, and when I say such a time as this, if you haven't heard me before talk about what it must be like, I often describe, I'm not Canadian. I assume, I, I always say it must be like living on top of a meth lab. That's you rented your apartment there and you're waiting for it to blow up downstairs and you can hear people arguing. Every once in a while, you see the authorities come and go and you hope everything works out. But I also know that authoritarianism is on the rise everywhere in the world. I was just watching a great talk from the Obama Foundation where he sat down with leaders from Poland, it was Poland, Estonia, and other places where they had fought back against authoritarian regimes, this new 21st century form of it, an autocracy, and how they were getting back on track for democracy, you know? So I know that you guys are feeling it up there, and I know it's more than truckers shutting down some of your capitals. I want to talk to you today about the life of Assata Shakur as proof that the community of acts is real. Not only is Assata Shakur's life proof that the community of acts is real, but her life is proof that the miracles of acts are real. These are not aspirational documents written 65 to 90 years later, then assembled perhaps 100 years after that with wild, far-reaching consequences and unattainable goals for the average person. More than likely, what we're reading, in my opinion, after quite a bit of time studying scripture, is more likely a tamer version of actual events that would have been more palatable to people. So today's sermon is Assata. They never got her. Assata Shakur left this world on September 25th, 2025. And that was a hard day for me. It was hard for me because I waited for the day that she would be allowed back into the United States to be welcomed as a leader, to be welcomed as a mother to the movement. But that never came. And so when the news came in the morning, it ran me to the quick. But then I remembered that she died free. And I just started blasting music and having a good time and partying downstairs and getting louder and louder and playing some of her speeches. And then I watched my cousin that night, my cousin Nicole Duncan Smith, who's a much better preacher and a much more popular person in the world, actually. She went to a get together where people were honoring Assata in Brooklyn that night, and the last living member of the Lost Poets wrote a poem that night called Assata, They Never Got Her. And so it got me thinking. I mean, if you're unaware of her legacy as a Black Panther, or of her writings, or of her work, of who she was as a kid growing up in the 5 boroughs, her long history of peaceful but radical activism with the Black Panther Party for years leading up to the incidents that she's the most famous for. Her talks, her writings, and work, you may be excused. What you probably know about Assata is that they never got her. That Assata Shakur, after being convicted of murdering a New Jersey state trooper in a shootout during a time of outright warfare between the FBI and the Black Panther Party, avoided being captured by the FBI, by diplomats, by the CIA, by US presidents. Why they even sent a pope to try and convince Fidel to send her back. I don't know why that makes me smile so much. But for 45 years and 327 days, Assata Shakur defied the empire. Good old Assata, they never got her. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He tapped Peter on the side and woke him up, saying, "Get up quickly." And the chains fell off his wrists. The angel said to him, "Fasten your belt, put on your sandals." He did so. And then he said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." And Peter went out and followed him. He did not realize what was happening with the angel's help was real. He thought he was seeing a vision. After they passed the first and second guard, they came before the iron gate leading into the city. It opened up for them on its own accord. They went outside and walked along the lane when suddenly the angel left them. And Peter came to himself and said, "Now I am sure that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from the hands of Herod, and from all that the people were expecting." Is it me, or does Jesus Christ of Nazareth just love a good prison break? My God. I mean, if we, and the other thing that Jesus seems to really be into, I mean, after he was dead, because like that's like that's the logical leap we're asking you to take here in Christianity, which is actually a very important thing. We're asking you to lean into the impossibility that someone who was murdered for sedition yet lives. Right? We're asking you to accept the absurd. But the other thing that Jesus seems to be into is social deviance, man. I mean, make no mistake, Peter is, at least by Roman standards, a social deviant. And Palestine is a colony of Rome. And, I don't know if that's relevant for the news, Palestine being a colony of some larger place that has European ties. And in case you don't know where Rome is, that later becomes Italy. So, if you want to draw that on a map. They're still giving us maps down here, guys. It's great. I'm sorry. I'm just very stoked about it. But as a historian, it's easier to see how the disciples and those ideas are incredibly dangerous from a Roman governance sense. That rather than subjecting you to my limited understanding of first century Jewish cultural, cosmological, and ontological understanding of their own sacred texts and way of their life, and make you sit through a bunch of supersessionism, let's just examine this from what we have a lot of the record of, because Europeans tend to only study themselves, Rome. And by Roman standards, anyone is acceptable. Rome absorbs your culture, your gods, your beliefs, your friends, the way you do things, and you become part of Pax Romana. And in exchange, you hold the emperor and what he provides in the same divine regard. This is the first social contract that the early church is breaking. You hold all gods equal. This is the social fabric of the republic. And in fact, that yes, we have conquered you, but we have brought you unlettered barbarians roads, stability, and safety. There's even toilets in some cities. The only exception that we note in this pattern as historians is they made one exception to stop the terrible insurrections in Palestine that had been occurring for about 100 years. And this is before the destruction of the temple, which is 30 years after Christ's crucifixion, which is also right around the same time the book of Mark and Luke is written. But these people, these Jewish people, were set apart from all other Roman citizens. And you have to understand, in the book of Acts, they're doing political organizing to try and get the same rights as the other citizens of Palestine. And what's that right? Well, the right they want is to worship one God. That's it. They don't want to worship the emperor too. This is incredibly dangerous social deviant behavior that is so hard for us to understand today. But this is This is scary stuff, particularly from a people who put up a good fight. And it's easy to see why in this context, Jesus and his followers and the ecclesia were a threat to the client-patron system of Rome, a system of wealth and taxes, was threatened by these people, these so-called followers of the way. It's because of their very existence that they have to be destroyed. You can't have patrons hanging out with clients. You can't have the unlettered sitting with scribes. You cannot have women leading men. You cannot have genderqueer Africans from Ethiopia having higher places in the church in your new system than the emperor. This is dangerous stuff. This idea that you could defy the emperor in this way, you could defy the empire's proxy states and their proxy leaders, that this was an idea, a people, and a movement that could not be allowed to exist from the Roman perspective. It wasn't that they were faithful or so wonderful, or they were singing such great hymns that they had to take them out. They didn't even have a book. They were weirdos. No one even liked them. They blamed them for everything. It's easy to see that now, separated by the gulf of centuries, cultures, and language, that Peter was in prison because he was simply Peter. Peter was such a problem that they put extra security on him. Why is that? Because Peter had prior prison breaks. My gee. I mean, so far, as we're tracking a new religious movement, let's just say from the perspective of a historian, that swears a dead man is God. Even though we know Roman law enforcement, and we call them centurions because we don't want anyone in, like, we don't want grandpa, which is basically like, how do I explain centurion in modern ways? Like, it's like if your military was also the local sheriffs on the side, and they killed that dude, and he's dead, dead. Like, they nailed him to a cross dead. Oh, wait a minute, what? Typical U.S. arrogance. You're Canadian, you guys get this. They're Mounties, and the people of Palestine are First Nations people. You guys get it, right? You guys know how to oppress Black, brown, and indigenous people and get them murdered up there too. I am sorry for assuming that it was only us. But this is the truth. The truth is, we're not the only ones with a price to pay. And we aren't the only North American colonial empire still in power. According to the US president, we're just the hottest one, guys. All right, back off. And really, there's no reason for me not to spread the blood around evenly. But you get the picture. There are circumstances that sometimes God sends you in. And these are the circumstances that God sent Peter, the other 12, some cop named Paul, who shows up later, we'll talk about maybe if they invite me back, into the wilds to preach the gospel to. This is the world that Peter's breaking out of prison. And it's easy to see why Peter was a threat to the empire's very way of life, and why his escaping prison would scare those who held power, and they would never let it go. Which brings us back to Assata. They never got it. How that must have shaken people at the Department of Justice. How it must offend people at the newly minted War Department that 90 miles off the coast of Florida, where they're still tearing up rainbow sidewalks, stood a Black woman who whooped their behinds, got caught, and then got out and defied their system while having a margarita. I declare to you as a ordained minister in the Church of Jesus Christ that moments like this make God smile. God loves a prison break. God honors those who defy empires. And I just want to close with some words from Assata herself. Often people don't even know the circumstances that they were chasing her for originally, why she was in trouble. Hopefully I can find it while I'm talking all this trash. Okay, I did. But most people don't know that what she was trying to do was she was doing community defense, and there was a drug dealer and something happened. And this is what she's accused for when she's being chased down by police. And then they say that she killed a New Jersey state trooper, which she denied to the day that she died. This is from her opening statement that day at the trial. And she says, the idea of a Black Liberation Army emerged from the conditions in Black communities, conditions of poverty, indecent housing, massive unemployment, poor medical care, and inferior education. The idea came about because Black people are not free or equal in this country, because 90% of the men and women in this country's prisons are Black and third world, because 10-year-old children are shot down in our streets, because dope has saturated our communities, preying on the disillusionment and frustration of our children. The concept of the BLA arose because of the political, social, and economic oppression of Black people in this country. And where there is oppression, there will be resistance. The BLA is part of that resistance movement. The Black Liberation Army stands for freedom and justice for all people. While big corporations make huge tax-free profits, taxes for the everyday working people skyrocket. While politicians take free trips around the world, those same politicians increase their salaries, millions of people are being laid off. This city is on the brink of bankruptcy, yet hundreds of thousands of dollars are being spent on my trial. I do not understand a government so willing to spend millions of dollars on arms to explore outer space, even the planet Jupiter, and at the same time close down daycare centers and fire stations. I've read the Declaration of Independence, and I have a great admiration for this statement. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all people are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst those people, and deriving those just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. These words are especially meaningful in the year of the United States' bicentennial, and I would like to help make this a better world for my daughter and all the children of this world, for all the men and the women of this world. But you understand that the Black Liberation Army is not on trial here. I'm on trial here. Ronald Myers is on trial here. And the charge is kidnapping and armed robbery, where the so-called victim is a drug pusher and a seller of heroin from our neighborhood, a man named James Freeman. If we're looking for liberation, if we're looking for salvation and hope in times like this, I will end with something like this. I am unsure what this force, this power we call God is. I have studied long and hard. I have read scripture. I have prayed. I have meditated. I have been to the desert and not eaten for days at a time to try to get closer to this power. I have learned and made a fool of myself. I have offered my body, my life, at times, my relationships, my home. But what I know about this God, and it's not much, is that it seems to be a force that's incredibly concerned with us. It's incredibly concerned with our care and our future. And it seems across cultures, across beliefs, and across time, it seems to interrupt and intervene in human history. And we give it a name in the Christian church. We call that salvation. But for the rest of the world, it looks like collective liberation. So whether you're here tonight because you're praying for world liberation or world salvation, know that somewhere God and servants like Assata are in the mix. And there just might be a prison break or two, too. Amen.